Tasha Sims here with Mark Karan, and you're listening to Conscious Living Radio, 100.5 FM in Vancouver, Wednesday nights, 6 to 7 p.m. And of course, it's not that right now if you're watching on Facebook Live, which we're doing streaming as well. So welcome to the show. Today's topic, Mark really likes it. Go ahead, Mark. Introduce it.
Well, the topic is about, let me get out of my own way here, but it's about how can doing nothing help you discover your truth? Yeah. And we're here with Jeanine Thompson.
You love that doing nothing part. I think for people who are super busy and juggling, you just hear those words. And actually, it's not true. I know people who cringe. I hear those words and I go, oh my God, yes, because it'll move us into today's topic, which is really what does that mean? Because it does mean something that's very peaceful and very necessary.
And it's true. Well, let me just say is because in my experience, I was always so busy being busy all the time.
Yeah.
And I beat myself up when I wasn't busy. It's like I should be doing something. I was always looking for something to do. I could never sit with myself.
Yeah.
And now I enjoy sitting with myself almost more than anyone else.
And that's a good thing. Okay, let me introduce Jeanine. She's a transformational coach, a speaker, an author. For decades, she led a psychotherapy practice, treating a range of anxiety disorders. She was a former yoga teacher, Reiki master, has a reverence for the power of energy, the body's innate wisdom. Her path was diverse. Spans multiple disciplines, including becoming a successful Fortune 500 executive. She's led human resource teams across the globe and recently published her book, 911 from Your Soul. She remains committed to helping individuals reach their highest potential. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be with you.
So your work, you call your approach, I really liked this. You called it both traditional and non-traditional, soul and science, intuitive and high performance. So can you tell us a bit about your personal path? What led you to move from, you had a psychotherapy practice, right? It was fairly traditional. How did you go from there to what you're doing right now, which is a little incorporating a lot of other disciplines that are a bit more non-traditional?
Yeah. I think that's such a great question. And the truth is, I think it was the intelligence of life that, moves to you and through you and away from you. And at certain junctures in my life, when I was an evidence-based psychotherapist, I loved, the gift to partner with my clients and help them create transformation in their life. And when I was approaching about the 10-year mark, I was starting to get restless, like there was something more for me. And I happened to meet a researcher who interviewed me on psychiatric emergency triage. And she said, someday I'll be back for you. And sure enough, 4 years later, she called me, and that's how I moved into the business leadership role. And so it wasn't planned, no career counselor, certainly not myself, said, we're going to follow psychotherapy, evidence-based research, SOP, and then you're going to move into a significant Fortune 50 business role when you've never taken a business class ever. And then similarly, when I was an executive, I just 12 years in, started to get that same restless yearning that there had to be something more. And it led me on a search to discover what was missing. And that brought me to yoga and Reiki, and it opened up a whole new world for me for the first time in my life. As an evidence-based cognitive behavioral therapist, we worked with our thoughts and our behavior and the body to some degree, but I had never worked with energy and soul and spirit, and whole new worlds opened up for me.
Well, it's the word you just said, whole. It's holistic. It's the whole picture. I'm curious where you see science and spirituality intersect, because in my practice, I can't even imagine not holding an awareness that includes energy and spirituality. Now, I don't need my clients necessarily to accept anything, but it is a part of what's occurring, and I'm aware of that. Science, people love science. They love to back up these deeper experiences with what they consider evidence that supports its legitimacy. I'm just curious, from your perspective, where do you think they intersect? How do you see that?
Well, I think it's a vital intersection today. Before, they have been often sitting on opposite poles. And I think the state of the world today and the state of what many individuals are going through, it is a call to live what I call the beauty of the and, how we artfully fuse what is proven and have a willingness and a curiosity to explore the unproven, to take what's visible and have it superpowered by the invisible. I actually think more power lies on the soul side of the equation, on the invisible, on the yet to be proven. I have a great appreciation for science, and those practices in my high performance side of my business are valuable, and they ground day-to-day behaviors and success. But there's untapped potential. Science always lags from my perspective. And I think they're starting to catch up with timeless wisdom and traditions. So to me, it's the beauty of the and. We need both today. We need it in our personal lives, and we need it in our business ecosystems as well.
Would you also say, because you're saying basically science without that ability to open to the unknown and the things that are not necessarily provable but can be experienced, that's essential on one side. Would you say it's true on the other, that those who are walking a spiritual path, that there's a calling to translate your experiences into the practical?
I think you beautifully said it. Yes, because that's why I love the beauty of the and. Being only in expansive spiritual experiences, but not having them grounded in life and bringing that wisdom and beauty and love into your day-to-day interactions and communication and business. Expansiveness without groundedness is suboptimized. At the same time, if we're only grounded in what is proven, we have left the universal intelligence and wisdom and creativity that's available to all of us untapped.
And the words full potential, because I know you use them a fair bit. Maybe you could define it. I think it's connected with what we're talking about here. What is your vision of full potential? Because sometimes I think about it and I go, it's the carrot. We're always moving toward potentiality and evolving. I don't know that that ever stops as long as we're in a human body. It's there, like it's bigger, 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 more of ourselves or essence. But how would you define full potentiality? What is that for you?
So full potentiality to me is to live fully expressed and fully aligned. You know, potential used to be, when I ran high potential programs as an executive, used to mean, you know, were you capable of advancing 2 levels in 5 years? There was a standard definition, you know, and there was a set of knowledge, skills, and abilities with that potentiality. Now, in being fully alive, what I've learned through my own journey and my clients is a lot of times they had reached potential in their job, but they weren't fully alive. They no longer had juice from doing their work. They no longer felt alive. They didn't feel like they were contributing as fully as they were capable of contributing. So I think that's a part of the definition. I think part of the definition is owning your truth and living fully out loud. That is being fully alive. So often we're taught that we're not enough, in one way or another. And I think when we live into our full potentiality, we've listened to that inner wisdom, that inner map that says, this is who you are. This is how you are meant to come alive in this world. This is your unique contribution. And you just feel comfortable in your own skin and you live from joy.
Do you think a state like that can change, or how do I want to phrase this? It, as you're describing it, what occurred to me just personally was I went through phases where I was there living it, and then all of a sudden I'm not. And I go, wait, like you were saying with your work, it's like something is, I don't even know if it's missing, but it's no longer in alignment.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you advocate for those moments where you realize that something is not quite?
Then I advocate consulting the one person that most people never do, which is, your inner genius, whatever you might call that. I happen to call that soul. Some call it entelechy. The Greeks did. It was the entelechy of a caterpillar to become a butterfly, an acorn seed to become an oak tree. So whether you call it inner genius, soul, it's remained unnamed. It doesn't matter, but it's the inward journey that's beckoning you. And that's what happened for 3 times in my career. Is I had lived a degree of my potentiality in those roles, and it was extraordinarily rewarding, and I'm grateful for those opportunities. But I also knew when my soul was saying, there's something more for you. There is something more for you. And I think that is, it's a lifelong growth school.
Do you think you need to believe that there's something more for you in order for there to be something more for you?
Yes and no. So it's helpful when we have a belief because we see what we look for, right? We often only see what we look for. So sometimes belief can be helpful. At the same time, sometimes beliefs keep us locked in and they are outdated and they no longer serve us. So I don't think belief is required. I think willingness is required. Am I willing to give this a spin? Am I willing to test and try and experiment and be open enough that I'm willing to be surprised in the best possible way?
Does it involve risk, do you think, often?
Yes, I think everything in life is consequence. There will be, some positive consequences, negative consequences, and with that is potentially risk, but I think it's all in how you choose to identify meaning. So risk actually wouldn't have to exist if we didn't assign it that meaning.
The meaning that there's something you're going to lose. So again, this is the belief. If I know that there's something, even in a tragic event for me, not against me, not just, I mean, it is what it is. You're not denying, you're not leapfrogging over the human reality of something. But if you believe that there's something, like you were saying, you'll look for it. You'll be open to see it. Otherwise, it will cloud your perception. It'll only be a tragedy, right?
Right. Absolutely. And so for me, I'm always just kind of asking for help me find that change in perspective. Help me be willing to see through my inner eyes what my human eyes cannot see.
And that brings us to the way to answer that 911 from your soul, which is today's topic, how to do nothing to find your inner truth. When you say do nothing, tell us what you mean.
Doing nothing to me means softening or a losing of the busy brain. Data would say we have 70,000 thoughts a day at least. And so most of us are operating our life through the narrative of that story, and we're listening to those thoughts. And doing nothing, to me, is that art of, how do I soften the mind? How do I quiet that crazy busy mind so that I actually can tune in to this trove of wisdom contained in silence?
And it sounds so beautiful, and yet so many people are afraid of it, even like Mark was referencing at the top of the show. Why do you think people are so uncomfortable being in that state with themselves, opening to that state?
I think there are a number of reasons. One is we've been trained that doing nothing is unproductive. Idle time is unproductive time. We've been trained that, we're worthwhile when we're doing something. So I think that there's a piece that it runs antithetical to getting stuff done, fixing things, moving along in life. I also think that it is true about that quote that we fear our greatness. I think it was Marianne Williamson, and I can't remember the exact quote in this moment, but I do think
it was from Mandela, though. She took it from Nelson Mandela. Yeah. That we're more afraid of our greatness than we are failure, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. So when we get back to that unknown, the unknown is that it's unknown. And so I think sometimes people are uncomfortable to sit with themselves. What might they discover? What might they need to meet and embrace? You see, if we stay busy, we can stay distracted, and we can numb, and we can not meet sometimes those dark experiences in our life that are calling, screaming silently or overtly, very loudly, that are calling for attention, saying, hey, this is no longer serving you. But I think people get scared to be with themselves.
It's like avoiding the shadow instead of bringing your light to it so you can see what it is. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. When we talk about a 911 from the soul, what are the ways, just some ways for people to sit there? People listening right now at home can go, oh yeah, I think my soul's been calling me. What are some ways that this manifests in people's lives?
So it plays out a number of different ways. For some people, they might resonate with what I described. It's like the details of their life look good from the outside, and they should be happy, but they're not. It's this elusive something missing, this persistent yearning that something's off or missing. I think for others, they feel lost. They're just not sure about their next chapter or the next trajectory of their life. For others, it might present in a familiar identity, maybe a relationship or your job or your health, something you knew yourself to be was shaken or stripped away. And all of a sudden it's like, well, who am I now? Who am I now? For some, it's a lack of juice. The things that used to make them laugh and bring them great joy are falling flat. For others, it's the big questions in life. They start to reach middle age and they're starting to wonder, is this it? And time is clipping by so fast, and they're wondering, what's it all about? What's the purpose of life? What's the purpose of my life? So there are many different versions of it. Sometimes it's quieter. It's playing small. You have this dream in your heart, and you are just playing small. You don't speak about it. You don't share it. You're scared that maybe you can't do it. A number of different presentations, but here is the one thing that unifies or kind of solidifies if it's a 911 or not, and that is an inward magnetic pull. So I had other stressors in my life, pretty significant stressors, from children's medical conditions to a divorce. And I didn't consider those a 911. They were overwhelming and sad at times and difficult. And I grew from them. I grew stronger and wiser. But the distinction with a 911 is there is a return or a remembering of divine consciousness. There's this connection or an exploration either within yourself or beyond yourself, that there's something bigger going on here. And that's one of the biggest distinctions, is this inward pull to get to know a part of yourself you've lost sight of, or maybe never even knew you had, your divine nature. That's part of the and. We're human and we're divine.
And I love what you're saying. I think that when people touch that divine nature, sometimes for the first time, you're overwhelmed with it's tears, but it's sad joy. It's, oh my God, this is who I am. Like it is a remembering. That is the word of the truth of your essence. And so it's hugely emotional. I'm curious how you see sharing that state, because it can be very, it's everything and nothing. It really is everything. You're connected to everything, but it's also nothing. There's nothing there. Like when you're in that void of oneness, it's not fragmented. It's not compartmentalized. It is empty and full at the same time. I mean, it's, how do you prove that? You don't, but I'm curious how you share it, because I think that longing to experience it with another person or perhaps a group of people is also something I'm seeing in this world. This very isolated, people are very isolated, and the longing is growing. Those who are in touch with this, there's a longing that's even more prevalent. Do you have thoughts on that?
I do. I think that longing is, I do think that we are in an age where all of us are being asked to remember right now. I think that is the longing. Who are we? Who are we as individuals, as a collective? And there is that thirst, not only to understand it individually, but to be understood in the collective. And initially for people, I mean, I have groups of people who will gather and we'll have these conversations, but if somebody is by themselves initially, it's a very interesting thing that starts to happen in silence, is that you no longer feel alone. And there is this unexplainable connection that you can tap into, where you almost feel like you're in that group already. You're already engaging with them, even though you might be sitting alone in your home. And my clients tell me that over and over again. At first, they got scared to be silent. And then for a while, they were frustrated because it's like, nothing's happening. What is this all about? Nothing is actually happening here. But the longer they honored their approach into stillness, because there are different ways to be still, the more they surrendered into that void of nothingness, and then the less they felt alone.
The more it became something, the nothing again.
Yes, right. So it's a little hard to explain, and yet there's a consistency of experience there.
The other, as I was listening to you speak, I see the mycelium network energetically. And that's part of it, right? When you're tapping in inside. So instead of looking for it externally, you're not looking at all, actually. You're breathing, being in it internally, which then once you're in those connectors, it just ripples out and we're all there.
We're all there. It's on this, I often describe it as an energetic grid, and it just is. It just is, and you will know the experience.
It's interesting too, there's so many cults right now. The rise in and the danger of group work. I've done a lot of group work, and I just think there's an awareness that is finally coming to light about the dangers of how it can be abused. But I think it's connected with what you were talking about, the desire for this deep, deep connection. There's a pseudo spirituality when you're in a group and you're all in a collective and you're all in agreement. So on the surface, there's that is so similar to what we're talking about and what one can experience internally. Do you have any thoughts on cults? Is it something that's attracted you in terms of understanding, needing to understand, or wondering about?
I don't, very honestly, I don't have a lot of thoughts on it. My concern is for anyone, anytime when we give over our power to another, whether that's an individual or a group, and beliefs. And that's where I think it's incredibly important to discern your own truth first, come to understand what is the truth for you. And if that happens to align with other groups, I think that's fine. But when I think of cults, I think about disempowerment and more aligning to someone else's truth, but not individuated power, fully alive and fully expressed and fully heard.
Which is also corporations, right? I would say almost every corporation has the makings of a cult, because you are being asked to serve the bigger picture, right? But okay, we can move on. We don't have to dive in there. I always find it fascinating because how people can give up their autonomy.
Yeah.
I find that I don't know, as if if we understood that we are free, perhaps we wouldn't need to do that. But the part that of oneself that does give it up, or as you say, whether it's in a relationship that's not balanced in terms of power, or in a work situation, because of fear, because you want to belong. It's just such a basic human desire and need to be accepted and belong. And yet, I'm just seeing, I think it's something that's worth talking about, whether it's work or spiritual groups or yoga or food groups or whatever it is. This whole idea of the collective right now is on the radar for me in terms of what's going on in the world and the polarization. And it's like, to belong here, you have to do this. To belong here, you have to do this.
Right. And it's it disincludes people.
Yes, it separates.
And it separates, which is the opposite of the universal law of oneness, right? But one of the things many of us were not taught, which is the power is within you. So I think when people feel vulnerable or they lose themselves in the context of a group, they need to be brought back into the truth of who they are, the truth of their power that resides right in this being. And if they have higher powers that they believe in, it's a within, around, and beyond you. But I think many just were not taught of the power that actually is within us. So they're vulnerable in the desire to be accepted and to be loved and to feel like they're enough.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. As soon as you think it's external, that someone's going to provide an experience that you actually can tap into and access, you're treading dangerous waters, I think. Yeah. So stillness, let's move into the how, because I'm sure there are people listening going, yeah, sounds great, guys, but how do I do that? My mind goes a mile a minute, or whatever they're saying to themselves. I'm sure you've got tips.
I do. I said, I understand that so well. I had so much resistance. So first of all, I would say, just to define it, I think stillness it's a turning inward, where we shift from our living from our busy brain, and we go into we come into our body, we embody our body. And I usually put one hand on heart center and one near my belly button, because we follow touch in our body. So we automatically start to go, oh, I'm going to take my attention and I'm going to move it back into my body. And that is the gateway to this wisdom that I talk about. There are a number of different ways to practice stillness. One is through quieter pursuits with the breath, the power of the breath. I have come to the last decade and a half. I cannot believe how powerful our breath is. You know, it's automatic. And if we don't do it consciously, it keeps us alive, which is goodness, but it doesn't provide the gateway into this untapped potentiality that I'm talking about. So I just close my eyes, hand on the heart, hand on the belly, simply breathe in through my nose, hold the top note briefly, and exhale fully through my mouth. And just several rounds of breathing. Now, if your brain is like mine, it's going to kick in and go, oh, I need to make this work call. I need to do this. I need to do that. Got to pick up the kids. That's okay. When you first start practicing stillness, it might not be still. So set your alarm clock, your phone, for 30 seconds and just practice being with your breath. And every time a busy thought pops up, simply say, noted, retouch. We don't want to fight our thoughts. The more we fight them, the more they activate. But if we can simply go, noted, and retouch, and if you really feel that breath, like your hands will move on your belly and you'll feel your diaphragm expand and fall, the more our awareness is on the breath in the body, the more we still. And I promise you, if you practice every day and don't give yourself a go pass. So if it's 30 seconds and you said noted 15 times, when you're done, I want you to say, well done. Well done. Be done with it and come back another day. It'll keep getting easier. So breath is one way. For some people, active pursuits work better. Data has shown that freeing runs help you lose your busy mind and you access another level of that universal mind. Rhythmic weightlifting, knitting. Again, it's a softening of the mind that can open a gateway. And one of my favorites is nature. Nature is a profound wisdom teacher. You can simply go outside and lay on your patch of grass, if you have one, and lose yourself in the sky. And in getting lost, you actually will find the piece of yourself that you're connected, looking for. You get lost in the beauty. And when we get lost in the beauty, we see more beauty. That opens up expansiveness. So there are different ways we can move into stillness, but I do offer this to your listeners. Even if you have a preference for being active or nature, always include quiet periods of just being with your breath every day, because most of us have to unlearn the story that I can't do it and that it's not productive, because you will surprise yourself and soon you will elongate that time period, because there is a peace, there's a freedom, a liberation that starts to occur in the brilliance of the silence that starts to pop up for you. You might get an inspired thought. You might just know, you have a sensing, or you hear something. It'll change the course of your life in the best possible way.
Have you ever found adding an auditory or a task to the brain helpful? So back to the first thing you're talking about, getting into the sensation, you notice your brain is off on work. But if you gave it a task, whether it was a count or a phrase, even in and out, but a word, something that it's doing, as opposed to trying to make it not do what it's wired to do, which is think.
You can. I do. And for some of my folks, I will start that way. I'll give them a simple breathe in through your nose to the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Hold for 2 and exhale for 4, just to help them do that. But I do want them to wean that over time, because our culture is, we've got this myth that we need something to help us do that. We need music, we need counting, we need a mantra. So if you need to start there, let's start there, but then let's start titrating that down, because I know you will discover you can do it without being prompted, without the guiding, because even the counting takes you away from the listening.
Good point.
So, yeah, and it's like people who say, well, I'm going to listen to my podcast and exercise. We've sub-optimized both. It's our culture. We always want to, make the most out of a moment, where actually the less we do in the moment, the more expansiveness we can invite ourselves into. Now, one thing though, a slight twist on it, instead of counting or a mantra, I have a practice in the book, and I call it grounding. But what we do know is if people do rhythmic activities, like even just sweeping, but being ever so mindful of the sweeping motion, or feeling the water on your hands as you wash dishes, your awareness into that activity, if you do that first, and then practice your 30 seconds to 2 minutes of stillness as you begin, sometimes that helps your parasympathetic and sympathetic system come into balance, and that might help you out. So I'm more inclined to teach either embodied practices that will help your body come into more harmony than I am to add a bunch of guided or music, even though I love them. And some I'll do them too. Listen, everything has a value. And it is so much better to have people start than to not. So honor yourself, but be open to just being with the breath.
And the authenticity of that moment is, for me, what is so, so appealing. And I didn't realize how, when we get cluttered, how inauthentic it actually is. It really is. And so we go, oh, I'm being real, but all of that, not really. It's
not real,
a program.
right?
Yeah.
Right. So in the book, I have, in each chapter of the 7 chapters, I have an earth view, a soul view, and the beauty of the and. So the earth view of mine often sounds like it's always fear-based. You're not enough. You need to do a little bit more. You should have, could have done that. The soul view says there are no limits. You are already whole, as is. If you made great choices, messy choices, a bunch in between, none of it matters. None of it's who you are. Your essence is pure. It's whole. It's already free. And so the art is, when we're stuck in that earth view of mine, in that 70,000 thoughts, 90% they say is repetitive each day. And it can sound so real because it's logical. It draws you to all the fear and the what ifs. But if we can reconnect with our center, with the core of our being, where the intelligence rests, and even science agrees now, we have 3 brains: gut, heart, and head. Information, 70 to 80% of the information flows up the vagus nerve. It's the opposite of what we were ever told. Think about, they always said, use your big brain. And this is not new. The gut brain, the first gut brain book was written in 1907. So this data has been there. That's when I made the comment before, it was not meant to be disrespectful. It's just been my experience that science lags what has been known for a long time. And it's our willingness right now, when our structures of patriarchy, when our the political system, the healthcare system, financial, medical, educational, across the board, are crumbling and not working for the vast majority of people, we're being asked, we're literally being called back into the truth in our being, so we actually can create the world we all hope and pray for.
Do you think what we're seeing is a kind of, when things are crumbling, people panic? They try to shore it up because there's just so much insanity out there. Do you think it is this fear-based, get the, like there's somebody just put the battering ram through the castle wall. We've got to
I think
the
it
crowd
is.
and
I think the solutions are coming from the earth view mind, which is scarcity. We got to fix it. We got to glue it back together, keep it the same. The heightened divisions, the haves, the have-nots. I think that's all part of that earth view paradigm. That's all scarcity, fear-based, not enough. When we join, when we're willing to entertain the soul view way of living, then we recognize there honestly is no scarcity. There's no need for that. We can solve any single problem today, should we so choose to, right? But we've got to move to understanding the power of love and the intelligence of love. Love will actually tell us the right path if we act.
And the interconnectedness, because they're,
Yes.
if we're all connected, if we're all the same in essence, not in obviously personality and story and everything else, then it's almost the whole biblical do unto thy neighbor as you'd have them do unto you. I mean, there just is no separation. And people, that would influence behavior in a certain way. It would influence everything. Yeah.
They decided that the God life in everything mattered. And I don't mean God in a religious sense. We couldn't stand for seeing somebody homeless or food insecure or whatever, or not being able to seek medical care, because we would recognize that in us. So the good news is we've got all this power, but we have got to expand. We've got to remember the fullness of who we are. We've got the human thing down to a science. We usually understand our personality. We know when our ego gets in the way. We know what we do and don't like about the physical vessel that I call it the wonder suit. I think that we are souls traveling in wonder suits. But when we step into being the essence of pure love, pure intelligence, pure infinity, unlimited access, my bet is on us all day long. And I think that's what's happening now in this age of remembrance.
Yet, what surprised me, like when the pandemic first started, I was one of the odd ones who felt joyful. My first reaction was not fear. It was, oh, wow, we're all in the same boat. Obviously things were happening that were not pleasant, but the fact that we were all experiencing something brought me to tears, and they were joy. I would call it joy. And then it shifted. Then it started to shift again with that, the whole polarization, and people now, I think, so determined to go back to what they're calling normal. And I'm going, whoa, but normal was like, it's as if the rock got overturned in the pandemic, and we're seeing everything that was underneath, which is necessary, but next would not be back to putting the rock down, right? Yeah. It's got to shift. It's got to dissolve. Yeah. Thoughts on that, and why people's craving to go back to what they consider normal?
It's safe. It's familiar. And we know that. I knew that as a psychotherapist, sometimes people would choose safety, the familiar of an environment, even if it, wasn't actually safe for them. I think from a fear-based mentality, there's not enough. So I better protect my little corner of the world to make sure my life and the people that I love, their lives are okay. And I think the greatest invitation, if you think about the many invitations during that time, but one of it was stay home, spend time with people that you love, reconnect with nature. What matters anymore? If you could lose your life to an illness, like what matters right now? And we also saw great generosity, people showing up, helping one another. They were great during tragedies, and showing up to help people. But very quickly, it wasn't an embodied way of living. It was almost like a brief coping mechanism. And I think the unsureness of, but can I trust that I could actually make a life this way? Can I trust that if we did take care of everyone, well, would there be enough? Because we've never been taught that ever since Depression eras and et cetera. It's always been a scarcity model. So the good news is that a whole bunch of people reunited with a different level of consciousness, whether it was with the planet, whether it was with their neighbor or their family or their relationship to their job. They're demanding different things in their job. We're seeing this. I don't know if you're seeing it in Vancouver, but certainly in the States, we've had the great resignation, the great regret, the great breakup, quiet quitting. There's all these terms. And I think as a former therapist, they were all predictable because they weren't there in the early stages of the pandemic. And now we've went through them all. We've kind of lost sight of the invitation to discern what matters most in life. What really matters? What's going to give you meaning? If your Earth School gig was up in a year, in a month, in 10 years, would you look back and say, you know what? I like the thumbprint that I'm leaving in the hearts of those that I loved, in the strangers that I met on the street, in the corporate building that I walked into every day. It's just an invitation to live more fully the love that we actually are.
Is there anything else you want to say about your book to invite listeners to pick up a copy and dive in?
Yeah, thank you for asking. I think that this book it's a blueprint for daily living to help you make that shift to recognize, when am I in the earth view? What is a soul view, in case you don't know? And how can I live the beauty of the ant? Live from my greater, highest nature more often. We're not going to crack the code every day, but what if we all did it 20% more a day, right? So you're going to have these tangible practices. And I think it's a book of hope and inspiration and remembrance. And there's somebody you're longing to meet. And that someone is you.
I love it. Well, your links to your book, I know, are available on consciouslivingradio.org, as is this interview, because it's available as a podcast after, and also all our other platforms, YouTube, and of course on Facebook now. We love to ask people just at the end, from your heart to the world, what's your wish? Everyone listening right now, or who's going to be listening on Wednesday.
My wish is for you to come to know the truth of who you are. Because when you meet the you you've been longing to meet, you are going to feel so alive, so loved, so perfect, so whole, and so free. And when you feel that, anything is possible for you and for all of us. And so come, my friend. There's somebody you're longing to meet.
Beautiful. Thanks for joining us.
It was a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
We've been speaking with Jeanine Thompson about her book, 911 From Your Soul, and also about doing nothing to land in the authentic self that you are. You're listening to Conscious Living Radio, 100.5 FM, CFRO in Vancouver. I'm Tasha Sims. Mark, you want to chime in?
And I'm Mark Caron, of course, hiding in the background.
Thanks.